Great. All right, so we're talking today about just the basic contract to close process. So you've got your buyer, okay? So you've already gone through the process. You've been showing houses. Okay, hold on a second. Let me make sure that, I think that's good. You've been communicating with other agents when you're showing the houses. So the fact that your buyer wants to make an offer shouldn't be coming as a surprise to another agent. You should know as much about the house as you can, right? You've already printed off the property disclosure and asked the questions of the agent. My favorite is calling the other agent and saying, so anything else I need to know about the house that I don't see in MLS? Something may have changed. I mean, it happens where I called one agent one time and she said, well, actually, they just put a new roof on yesterday.
Nice.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool. Okay,
Sense.
good to know. And so it's stuff like that. You just never know. So give the agent a chance to talk. Anything else I don't know that's not in MLS, and just stop talking and see what they say.
Yeah, like
So.
it's just like, yeah, I went under contract 3 days ago, but I don't think it's gonna work out, so I didn't update it.
Yeah, and that's an
I
interesting
did that
one.
for a showing, because I wanted
Yeah.
to come out and preview it, and she's like, oh, well, it's under contract, so she just hadn't updated it.
Okay. Yep. That's not good, but that's information you need to
Yeah.
know before you decide whether it's a waste of your time or not. Okay. But you've gotten through the showing process. Buyer says, I want to buy. So you're about to do the contract paperwork, but there are things that you need to know before you can fill out the contract. And it's just so much easier if you've had these conversations or understand what it is that you need to get from your buyer, from your lender. You need to have had all these bits of information collected before you really sit down to do this. And the first thing is the name of the buyer. I know that seems so stupid, but who's buying the house? And how do you spell their name, really? And, hopefully, as we skip to that number 3 one there, you've already done the buyer agency paperwork and you have some of this addressed already. But clearly, that's an important bit of information. Who's the buyer? And then who's the seller? And, of course, you can't always tell that. The listing means nothing. You don't go by what the listing says. So then you go to the tax record. What does the tax record say? That is likely the real owner of the house, but even that doesn't necessarily apply, because as I think I've mentioned before, I had one, we've had one recently where we began the listing and then she died. And so now her brother had to take over, but of course the tax record hadn't changed yet, because it takes a little while for that to happen. So you never know. So a quick call to the agent to double check who the seller is. Never leave the seller blank. Just don't do it. Don't submit one with the seller line blank. It's not professional. It does happen sometimes, and they just expect the list agent to fill that in. It's not professional. Get the information and establish who the contract is going to be between. Okay. So, and again, buyer agency paperwork, that should be done while you're showing houses, certainly before any contract is written. And when you complete buyer agency paperwork, that means the broker has seen it and signed it. And I say this because every now and then we come up on where it's not actually signed by the broker, and that means we're not under agency. So it's really important to get that done. Okay. So then we go on to the next section here. And I've changed the screen here. Also, what you're going to need as you get moving along, this is going to come fast and furious. So first of all, is your buyer really even qualified? So before submitting this offer, you're saying you've got that pre-qual letter, right? And really, it's a great idea to see it before you start going to see houses. Just know, can you buy a house or not? Don't waste your time if they really aren't able to. So not only do you need them to supply you with that pre-qual letter, they email it to you or whatever, so you have it digitally, or if they want to hand you a copy, that's great, you can scan it. Any way you look at it, call the lender. Verify you know, I just talked to them. What do I need to know about what you're telling me here? What's, you know, this is their limit. This is their, what's the deal with this letter? Because of course a lender can write a letter for whatever amount. The buyer may have $1 million and have done a pre-qual letter, some generic thing. Sure, they can buy a $200,000 house. Okay, so does this mean they can buy a $200,000 house and that's it? Or they happen to say they want to stay within 200, which is fine, but what if we did a 210 or a 215? Are we gonna have a fight on our hands? You can just have them generate a new letter, right? So you need to know what their system is, what their process is. The property address, I know this doesn't seem like anything, but you gotta have the right address. You need to get that TMS number. Again, you get that from the tax page. Okay, HOA stuff. If the house is in a neighborhood that has an HOA, you need to write this in the contract anyway. So you can't always rely on the MLS. You've got to verify this. I've said this a million times, I think, that don't trust anything that you see. Call that contact. Is that the right number? Is that the right annual amount? Because sometimes things change in the middle of a listing, or sometimes they've got just old information, period. So verify it so that the information on the contract is right, because what's on the contract is what, in the end, the attorney is going to be using to do all the prorations for buyer and seller as far as what their portions are. So we need to have good information. Ask your client if they have a preferred attorney. Many will not, and we know that MGC is our escrow agent, and they are happy to hold the escrow money. They're happy to do the closing. But if your client has somebody they work with, or somebody else has said you got to go with this person, then they're able to make that choice. But let's keep it simple. So in the contract, have the earnest money go to that attorney and not MGC. I mean, it's just easier that way. And while we're talking about earnest money, you need to even indicate in the contract what it's going to be. Are you going to be giving a check, or are they going to have to wire it? What is the method? So these are all conversations that have to occur. And we're only on page 1 of the contract. So now when you go on to page 2, then you start to realize, and beyond, 2 and beyond, you start to realize there's even more information you need. So at the top of page 2 in section 5, it says who's going to pay the closing costs, right? Is buyer going to pay? Is the seller going to contribute? If you're determining that you want the seller to contribute to the closing costs, then you need to have had that conversation with the lender, how much you can ask for without asking for too much. There is a too much. And so get a good number from the lender based on the loan type. Oh, and I didn't even put the loan type on here, but that will be on the pre-qual letter. That will be indicated in the pre-qual letter. But so that's something you need to get from the lender, and a potential close date. How long will it take to close realistically based on the kind of loan it is? You know, how much work have they already done on this loan process? Sometimes the buyer has already gone through the approval process and is ready to go, and that shortens the time frame considerably too. So get the potential close date from the lender. Names to go on the title. So it's generally the same as the buyer, but not always. Sometimes husband's buying but wants wife's name on the title too. That's fine. Talk to the lender about that though too. Let's double check that with the lender just to make sure, because there might be a reason not to have the second person on the title. Sometimes that can add a little wrinkle as far as the approval process, and that might be something to do later. Add the wife later maybe, but just double check with the lender that that's cool if they want 2 people to go on the title when only one is buying the house. But this is all information you got to get. Okay, then as you keep moving forward, it's going to ask, do you want a home warranty? Does the buyer want a home warranty? Well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. This is just another negotiation, right? So maybe the buyer says, never mind, I'm good with stuff. I'm a contractor myself. I don't need a home warranty, whatever. So if you're not asking for one, then the seller goes, oh, look, they're not asking for a home warranty. That's cool. But if you really want one and your buyer wants one for peace of mind, then you need to know what home warranty you're going to ask for and how much it's going to cost. So you have to have those details at the ready. And we have that in Paperless, the primary ones that have provided us information over the years and have contacted us, we have a list of that. As I think I've mentioned, it gives basic plan amounts and then the website that you can go to and that you can refer your client to check them out if they want to go more in depth. Also, the utility and flood zone information, there's a section that it's asking about, is this on public water or, is it sewer, whatever. So you need to know the details about that, which you should know after seeing it. It should be correct in the tax record and or in the MLS. If you have a question, obviously call the list agent. The flood zone information can be accessed. I believe FEMA is a fairly accurate website that you can go to get a basic idea. The tax record will have a little bit of information, but it's kind of funny how sometimes it seems to have conflicting multiple zones that the property seems to be in. So it can be a little bit tricky, but I believe going to FEMA will be a good step. Okay, so you got through the contract because you got all that information together, figured out what you needed, and were able to submit it, negotiate it, and now it's ratified. So immediately upon ratification, you need to work out the earnest money, right? Get the earnest money. So get that check from them and bring it into the office and so that MGC can pick it up, or get it to the closing attorney if it's not MGC. Drop it directly with the attorney. If it's going to be wired, make sure it gets done in a timely fashion. And we've got wiring instructions for MGC and Paperless. Another closing attorney will need to provide that to you. If you're sending earnest money to an attorney, they're going to want that contract as well. So you need to make sure you're including the contract with that earnest money, and then calling the attorney and saying, okay, let's go ahead and get a tentative close date scheduled. Let's get it on the books. But just don't do the title work yet. Let's hold off a little bit. Because what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're protecting your buyer and not allowing them to spend any more money than necessary until after you get through the inspection portion of the deal. Because of course, inspections are what? 10 business days of due diligence. You have the chance to go through, look at things. Not only are you looking at the house and potentially determining right there that you don't want it. Maybe there's something really bad you see with foundation or mold or something like that. But maybe you're like, okay, this is cool, but this and this and this need to be fixed. And so you do the repair addendum. The repair addendum, of course, is a whole new negotiation. So we've negotiated the contract. That's nifty. Repair addendum essentially supersedes the contract by saying, if these things aren't agreed upon as well, the contract is void. The buyer can get out of it if he wants to. So make sure you get through the whole inspection and repair addendum process before you allow an appraisal to be ordered or the title work to be done. Once you get through the repair addendum process, you're relatively safe unless you are really fearful of what that appraisal is going to bring. But honestly, as a buyer, the appraisal generally can only help you. It's either above what you're asking, which is awesome, which you're offering to pay for the house. But if it's below what you're offering for the house, then that seller is going to need to come down, or they're not going to have a sale on their hands, because generally your buyer, unless they're so emotionally attached to this property that they can't let go, they're not going to pay more than it's worth and have to bring that additional money to the closing. They'll only get a loan for this. So you can pretty much let the appraisal and the title work run its course once you get through the repair addendum process. So you've got the earnest money that you collected from this ratified contract. You sent the contract to the attorney so that they know what that earnest money goes with, and you're scheduling that tentative close date. you also immediately need to send that contract to their lender, so the lender has it on the radar, because they have 5 business days to get that loan applied for if they haven't already done that. And you need to make sure that they do that, because that is a, no, come in here, Dee. Come in this way. You can sit right here. Because that is a, that's one of the ways they can lose their earnest money. It's okay, we're recording. So, it's one of the ways they can lose their earnest money is if they haven't applied for that loan. If something goes south much later in the process and the buyer wants to get out and they can't get their loan, did this happen to you, James? Yes?
I feel like it's happening now.
Oh, okay. But did they apply for the loan within 5 days? Okay. Okay, but see, if they hadn't and things are going south with the loan, then that list agent, if they're really on top of things, will say, all right, I'd like to see the date that they applied for the loan. I'd like proof of that, please. I'd like proof of that you deposited the earnest money. They want to see all this stuff because they want to catch you in a scheduling snag. Okay, if you don't follow those guidelines, then the buyer can lose the earnest money. And so you want to make sure you're protecting them by saying you've gotten in there, right? You've gone to see the lender. You need to do that. So they've done that. And guess what? You need to create that transaction in Paperless Pipeline because you have a buyer client under contract. So that's when it needs to happen. It doesn't need to happen the day before closing. we need to see that paperwork. Let's go ahead and get that in there. It protects all of us. So, okay. There you go. Okay, but we're still not able to kind of coast yet. So now, that's just in the first day or two, right? Once you've got a ratified contract that you're getting all of this set up with the attorney, the lender, and your buyer, and everything. You also immediately need to start scheduling the inspections. I mean, already have it ready, already know who your buyer wants to go with for the inspections and start scheduling it. Say you'll schedule it. It's a lot easier if we schedule it, just because we're gonna try to get the termite guy and the home inspector and the HVAC guy maybe out there all at the same time to try to make it easier time-wise for all of us, that we don't have to keep going back there. And they can talk to each other. These inspectors will talk to each other and kind of compare notes. Did you see that? Yep, I saw that. And don't forget to look for that when you go down there or whatever. It's just a lot better. It's just it's hard sometimes to get everybody there on the same page, but at least you try to get everybody out there at the same time. But you want to schedule them as early as you can in the 10 days, because you want time to go over their reports. And then if you need to get another inspector out there, and then you need to do the repair addendum. And I mean, if something crazy is happening and you need to get an inspector out and then something else needs to happen, you can always request an extension of the due diligence period based on this one factor. And you know, that type of thing is totally possible. But in general, we want all of this to get taken care of and be ready to submit that repair addendum by day 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there. Let's not get it down to the wire. So along the way, you've got to talk to the list agent, especially if that house is occupied. You obviously need to say, all right, we've scheduled the inspections for such and such a time. Please have your seller out. That's the other thing, you know, you need to make sure that you're there and the seller is not there during these inspections. So the list agent will be not surprised when you're going into the house and at these various times for the inspections. Keep them up to date on what's happening with that. You're still checking in with the lender to make sure that the buyer has actually gone in and filled out the paperwork. Just a quick, hey, just making sure we're good. We good on that loan process? Everything all right? And they're gonna get back to you. Yep, you bet. It's underway. So the repair addendum. Okay, so you're negotiating the repair addendum. I mean, this is all what's happening in this 2-week period. Is what's going on. So it can be busy, but you want to have a few days there where you're waiting around. So
The repair addendum requires you to put another timeline on there. When you do the repair addendum, you're supposed to give the listing agent like a schedule, so that you can kind of keep up with what's supposed to be done and when
Yes.
you can check it.
yeah, right. I mean, in the repair addendum, you're going to establish, when you'd like to see the repairs done and that sort of thing. So, right. So once you have got a signed repair addendum by everybody, that means great. We've done that negotiation and we are actually moving forward with this contract, so let's do it. That means you are calling the attorney and say, okay, we're good. You can go ahead and do the title work whenever you're ready to do that. The lender should know, okay, we're good, schedule the appraisal. And then at this point, you're kind of playing a little bit of a waiting game. You're making sure that the list agent is on top of getting those repairs done. And yes, kind of be on top of your own time frame. Whatever you put in that repair addendum, be ready to follow up. And if you want to bring an inspector out, or if you just want to eyeball it yourself, if there's some simple things, but be ready to go in and do that follow up to make sure that the work was done when they said it would be done. After the appraisal is done, you should know when the appraisal happens. If you haven't heard from the lender about it in a few days, go ahead and follow up. Just make sure that you're good with the appraisal, and then you're getting so close. Things can still happen, but now you're doing the walkthrough. Whether it's a week out, if that's how far out, sometimes sellers will not do repairs or can't do repairs a week before closing. Sometimes they may want to wait, and you can negotiate this. You can insist that it be earlier than that, but if it's stuff that they may not have done, if your buyer hadn't asked for it, it's not like foundation stuff that they have to do or certain things they have to do. If they've agreed to do things specifically because your buyer asked, they may want to wait until that 5-day period prior to close to actually completely finish it, because if your buyer flakes somehow, right, and they can't buy the house, the seller is going to be out that money that they might not otherwise have spent. So that's a little tap dance that sometimes people will do. So be reasonable and do the walkthrough maybe 4 or 5 days prior to closing, and that way you have enough time to notice, hey, these things aren't done yet, and it gives the seller enough time to get them rectified. Whether you want to do a second walkthrough right before closing, that's not a terrible thing too, like the day before or the morning of, just to make sure the house is still in good repair, hasn't been vandalized or whatever, because especially if it is lived in, they need to get their stuff out. So you're going to need to make sure that they've gotten everything out and that it's still in good condition after the move. So there may be a couple of walkthroughs that you do in the end, in that last week. You're also still talking to the lender because you want to know that the loan is all good and that we don't have to worry about not making the close date. If that lender is really thinking you're not going to make that close date and it's going to be a big one, he should be talking to you too. He should be giving you a big heads up. Hey, we can't do this. We're waiting for this, or whatever. If it's going to be more than 5 business days, then you need to definitely send an addendum. Send an addendum to extend that and hope that the seller agrees. And the seller's in a tough spot at this point and generally will, but they won't agree multiple times and they'll get mad and that kind of thing. So they want to sell it as much as you want to buy it. So hopefully they'll agree. Also, you need to make sure that the buyer has received the CD from the lender 3 days before close. If they don't have it, call the lender. You kind of be asking them, hey, do you get anything yet? You get anything yet? If you don't have it, but in like midday on that 3rd day before closing, you need to call the lender. Say, what's the hold up here? We want to make sure that we're going to be able to close. I just want to make sure we're good, right? Because otherwise, if you need to change the closing date, now everybody needs to know the schedule, the attorney, the attorney's waiting for it too. So this is where follow-up is just really big. You have to be on top of the dates. So, and in this last little stretch, the buyer has some work to do too. He needs to be ready to put the utilities in his name. And it's something that people think about and then don't think about. Sometimes it kind of sneaks up on them. But really, what would be nice is if everybody would put a list of utilities like in MLS or something, a sheet. There are some, and I've tried to create this, and I don't think I created it very user-friendly fashion. But to have your sellers list the utilities. Who does the trash, who does the power, the water, all of that. That's really nice to have. So as a buyer agent, you can contact the list agent and say, just out of curiosity, do you have this? Because the attorney is going to try to provide that as well. I think they're going to try to solicit that kind of information. But if you have it, the buyer can be ready and be preparing for that. And then also the buyer needs to be looking. That's okay. It's all right. Yeah, it'll be. I mean, it is what it is. So, come on in. Sure. We're almost done with what my little presentation is, so then we can kind of chat if there are any questions about what's going on here. But yeah, the buyer needs to know that they have to be ready for whatever money they're bringing to the table, and it's not a personal check. So there's preparation that needs to be done. If it's over $5,000, then they're going to have to wire that money, and they need to be ready to do that. They need to be looking in their emails. The attorney will be sending them the wiring instructions, and they need to do this probably the day before. Is the safest, because otherwise everybody could be sitting there at the table waiting for the money to come in. So that's kind of the process. That's it on that regard. So any questions about that? I mean, that was a relatively short and sweet kind of a deal. So
it's kind of nice when that utility sheet we were talking about it was included with the documents. Because everybody puts the property disclosure and everything, and it'd be nice to have that utility sheet in there too.
I agree.
Yeah.
I've thought that, and I have had agents on the other side send a sheet, and actually they sent it and they had it digitally somehow, where you clicked on a link and you were filling in stuff, and I'm like, wow, I would love to know how they set that up, because that's pretty cool to be able to just fill in that information and then it goes back to them automatically when it's done. So apparently I don't have access to that tech yet, but if we can find that, I think that's a really useful and it's just helpful, when you have that information ahead of time. So
the other thing is, when they get to re-inspect, it works out really well for some reason with new builds, but when it's a resale, sometimes it becomes a scramble. At least for me, I don't know why, but it becomes a scramble, because if your buyer is like coming in from out of town, and it's like sometimes you have to do it like 2 hours before the actual closing, and then everybody's writing their little list, so it gets a little hairy.
Yeah, see that I wouldn't call that the re-inspect. That's the thing. If you're going to do a re-inspect, and if they're from out of town, then you just need to do the re-inspect, I guess, and take a home inspector with you, or a contractor maybe, or so, if it's complicated. If it's not, if it's, did they tighten this? Did they replace the light like they said they were gonna? Did they do? If you can eyeball it, then you just do it. I would say that 2 hour before is to go in and make sure there's no graffiti on the wall. No holes in the wall from the movers when they were moving the furniture out, or you know what I mean? I think that's probably, and making sure that it's not flooded or something, right? The pipe didn't burst in the middle of the night, or that's what the 2 hours. I don't think that's the re-inspect time. I think you've run out of time to say, hey, seller, you didn't do this and this and this. I mean, you can say it, and you can sit there at the closing table and definitely come to an agreement. Well, okay, I want you to write a check to the people who were supposed to get this done. Leave it with the attorney. The attorney will get it to that contractor as soon as it's done.
I've done that.
Yeah, and I mean, it definitely can happen that way, but I think generally that last walkthrough is really for, let's just make sure the house still is standing, not flooded, not graffitied up, and, right.
Yeah.
You know, that's probably more what that's for.
Okay.
But if you feel the need to do a big re-inspect, then I would do that 3 or 4 days,
Yeah.
at least, you know,
Okay. Yeah.
beforehand. And let the other agent know, listen, I'm going, everything's done, right? I mean, you need why don't you get me the receipts? I wanna see this, I wanna see that, you know.
Okay. Oh,
Go ahead, no, you're good.
I had what I call worst case scenario. We were gonna do we had the closing kind of scheduled for a day, and I say it just like that because it was actually a discussion that morning, and then somewhere a little bit later that morning, they said, yeah, we're gonna do it today. Yeah. And so I called the listing agent and said, hey, because they had a lockbox on the door. I said, the buyers want to do their walkthrough to check the house. And she told me no. And I was like, what do you mean no? She says, no, we're not going to go through all of that. Just go through the closing. And I said, but you have the lockbox on the door. She said, I took the key out. I mean, she was just really very nasty. And I was like, I really want to do something to you, but I
So why, was she afraid that you were gonna go in there and find more stuff that the seller needed to do?
See, I think so. Because when we actually did the close and we came in there, the house was nasty. It was like they had somebody stay there for the weekend or something, and they had a dog or something, so we had to clean the house and everything else. And I just, it's that ethics thing, do you
Right.
contact somebody?
Yeah, that doesn't seem very above board to refuse admittance
Yeah.
to the buyer, to do that final walkthrough. How many times had you gone through the house?
Oh, we went through it, to show it, of course. And then I went through it with the inspector. But the buyer only went through it once.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it doesn't feel very above board, so maybe you could have had, I don't know if you were here or not, but your broker call their broker and say, listen, I'm just concerned because we couldn't get access to the house prior. We were not allowed access to the house prior to closing, and this is the condition we found it in.
Yeah.
Now, buyer still bought the house.
Right.
It was a matter of cleaning it up, and it was crummy, but that's the way it was, but it does seem like that was not the proper procedure, and that maybe somebody needed to understand that the agent had done that, because,
Yeah.
that's not how we expect
Yeah.
it to go.
And like I said, I thought about ethics, I thought about
Yeah.
professionalism, and this particular person was a broker. I don't know necessarily the broker in charge, but was a broker. And I don't know, I guess my focus was more toward my clients and making sure they were taken care of.
It's true, and you had to do what you had to do, and all right, you know what? I'll help you clean or whatever, right? I mean, we do what we have to do, and I'm not saying take it to realtors or anywhere else, because the deal went through and your client didn't lose money per se or whatever, but it was more of just this is not the process, and I think somebody should probably know that we were denied part of this process.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
and just kind of let them know it on a very local level within that brokerage, and just say, I'm just concerned, I didn't appreciate how this was handled.
Okay.
Thought I'd let you know, but the deal is done, we don't need anything, I just thought I'd let you know.
Yeah.
But that's for a broker to call the broker, you don't call a broker.
Right. Well,
Yeah,
and
okay.
I guess, I don't know. Like I said, since my focus was really on my clients,
Right.
making sure they were okay. I thought about it later, and I thought, you know what, it's done. They're in the house.
Mm-hmm.
But every once in a while, this comes up, and I just think maybe I should have said something. I don't know if she was having a bad day, or she normally does this, or
Yeah,
I just know it happened to me. So I kind of let it go, but okay. So I won't let it go if it happens again. It's never happened again, but that's the first time it's ever happened, truthfully. But yeah, I always feel like, you don't have a course of action, because I feel like I'm tattletelling, if that makes any sense.
well,
Course of action.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know if agents are not fulfilling each part of their duty. I mean, part of what we have to do is work with the other agent to ensure the successful transaction. And if you're preventing another agent from doing something, then we need to know about that too. I mean, we have to be. The seller is to make that house accessible for inspections. But there are certain obligations they have, and that's one of them. That's an expected.
Yeah.
An expected part of it.
And I can tell you personally that when we went in the house was actually dirtier than it was when I actually showed it, which made me think that they had somebody stay in the house.
So it was vacant, but not vacant, is what you're saying?
Right, like they had somebody stay in the house, and then they didn't want anybody else to go in because they knew it wasn't cleaned again, and they weren't going to clean it. So I think that was the whole thing.
Right. So I think that's just something that, I mean, we'd want to know if that was the way that one of our agents was conducting business.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't reflect well on the agent. It doesn't reflect well on the company as a representative, right? If that agent is representing. So, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, nothing legal to be done about that.
Right.
But just informational,
like
so that better practices can be observed.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what I think. Anyway.
I don't feel like I'm tattletale.
Thoughts, James?
I'm just trying to get to the table.
You just need to finish.
I just need to finish one. This
Okay.
is the second one that I've been under contract and working towards getting completed.
Yeah.
Just trying. The buyer's having financing issues now. First, we couldn't get in touch with the bank, the lender that pre-approved him. Then we changed banks, and they're taking them through the approval process prior to the pre-approval process.
Okay. I mean, sometimes buyers will come to the contract. They're ready to go. They've been approved, and their loan paperwork is already in, and everything's already done. That's a good thing. I mean, that's.
Yeah, so we're just waiting for that to happen at this moment. So we'll possibly working with another lender to try to figure out something, just to have a backup, because the communication is very poor with the second lender.
Oh no! So the second one's bad too.
Yes.
So are you under contract?
Yes.
How is the seller responding to all of this delay for the?
They are taking it like a champ.
Oh wow.
Is there another
Good.
one that way?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Here, come on in. You can slide the chair or whatever.
You know, the one thing I wanted to say was be careful about going to a different lender, because every time you do that, each lender does a hard pull on your client's credit, and depending on how many inquiries they already have on their credit, it could affect their score. Because I had a client that was using Quicken, and I told her, I said, I really don't recommend that. And it's not because Quicken is not a good loan, it's just that my experience is that what Quicken does is that once they lock a client in, they do something that I think is devious, as a word that comes to my mind. They will pull that client's credit every week. A hard pull. They don't have to, but they do. And they put enough inquiries on it so that that client has to deal with them because they've lowered their score. And they can use the original score, so they're good. But if they go to somebody else, they wreck their credit. And this particular time, she ran my client's score, she had like a 700 or something. They ran her score down to 5 something. They did hard inquiries, they like 10 or 11 hard inquiries, it's dropped her score.
Wow.
And they kept saying, well, we can finance her, we can finance her. But, so be careful.
It's always nice to use local. I mean, just in general, because you want somebody you can talk to.
Right.
And you can reach, and you're not calling an 800 number or New York or whatever. I mean, it's not saying they can't get it done, but it's just nice to have a face to talk to, and that's where we like to know the lenders and have those relationships.
That makes such a difference.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, it does. Especially if
Their
you-
responsiveness, just like Debbie was talking about, on Tuesday. Was it Tuesday? It's responsiveness, and her specifically, yeah, she'll respond to me on weekends and whatever, can you write me a new letter real quick, or, hey, I have a quick question. And I mean, it's that kind of thing that you're not going to get from the 800 number.
Mhm.
So it's always nice. So I'm sorry that you're going through that. Is this isn't the same buyer as that first?
No.
To say, I'm sorry. Yeah, you just want to get to the closing table.
Mhm.
So have you already done inspections and everything?
Mhm.
So you've already been through all that process. And the seller is patiently waiting.
Because we had to move because this is an out-of-town buyer, so we had to move the closing date from the 16th to the 30th
Of this month, okay.
of this month. So they were fine, with that as of now.
So that's giving you some breathing room for the loan.
Yes. So we're just trying to get this process started
Mhm.
from the lender side.
Mhm.
Because once we get it started on the lender side, we know they could possibly do it in 2.5, 3 weeks.
Right, because you've already done the inspections.
Yes.
Yeah.
You agree on anything repair addendum wise, or nothing needed to be done?
There are things that need to be done.
Okay.
HVAC.
Oh.
Is a big one.
Okay.
So,
But the seller won't do it until he
yeah,
knows that
sure.
okay.
Chad Kurtz for movement I tell you, went out Saturday, made an offer on one that got ratified Sunday. We're closing on the 20th, and I called Chad and said, hey, can we do it the 16th or 19th? He said, probably not the 16th. But I mean, he was really on it. She submitted her documents. So it sounds like your client's there. But Chad Kurtz, you've dealt with him before?
I haven't dealt with him. I know the name Movement. Movement is really good. Definitely, they've got several really good people here in town. Again, there are actually quite a few good lenders here in town. It's just a matter of getting to know them and forming that relationship. So,
Yeah, Chad is. I mean, he.
yep.
Are they
So-
dealing with someone in town here? Or?
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
All right, but that's the whole process. So I've already gone through the whole process. So we can kind of talk about it a little bit after that. But anyway, so I created I don't know. I did a little PowerPoint because I thought it was pretty and translated well to the screen. But I also did these, which are less pretty, but more of a check mark. Kind of check your lines off, kind of a process. So I'm trying to think if I left anything off really, but at least it gives you good guideline about when you need to be looking to do various things, a few reminders to check in with people, that sort of thing. So that's really the process. It's kind of labor intensive to be a buyer agent
Yes.
as opposed to a list agent. List agent, you kind of sit back and you wait for things to happen, and then I know there's more to it than that, but I'm saying once you get under contract, you're kind of waiting on the buyer to do their thing and then get the repairs.
The other thing I'll tell you about, since you have that, if the seller has home warranty, there's nothing stopping them from having the home warranty company do it. That's a service cost, $75 to $100. So their paperwork shouldn't affect that. I mean, like tell the listing agent that it'll only make their house more sellable if the contract falls through, kind of thing, and kind of push them that way, so they just go ahead and get it done. You know what I'm saying?
She's not wrong. If it's something that's going to need to be done anyway, any inspector's going to find it, and it's a problem
Yeah.
to anyone, they should just go ahead and be fixing it anyway, since they know about it.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the point in not fixing
Put
it?
that little bug in the listing,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
listing agent's
But-
ear, and